Joel, hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, of course, dude. We watched your video the other day on the strikes and everything, and it was super informative. Also, very funny. I like how you put it together.
I'm glad. You know, if you don't entertain people, like they don't absorb it, right? Like it's just the way it goes.
100%. Yeah, I was saying that as well. A lot of people do, especially in this day and age, taking a lot of information through humor. A lot better than other means. So, but yeah, thank you for making that video, and it was, like I say, incredibly informative. And I wanted to reach out because after watching the video, myself and a lot of other people in the chat had still some questions that maybe weren't necessarily 100% answered, but that's because you're never going to cover everything in such a short time. But all the important stuff was covered. But yeah, there was just a lot of people asking questions that I have no idea how to answer because I'm not in the industry. But before we get into the questions, is there anything that you'd like to lead off with or anything? Or
yeah, first of all, I'm not on SAG's board. I don't represent SAG. I don't represent NAVA. I'm just an actor, right? I'm just an actor trying to get the word out to protect our industry. So like nothing I say should be construed as the official word of SAG-AFTRA or really anyone except Joe Zieja. That's it. That's the only person I represent in this instance is myself, not my agents or my clients. So
amazing. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that as well. I didn't realize you weren't...
trying to keep myself out of trouble.
Yeah, of course. No, that's perfect. One of the big questions that I've been saying for quite a while, actually, the whole idea of unionizing for voice actors, I think unionizing is very good. I think it's a very good thing. But obviously, different unions do different things. And it seems like in the past, in the previous strikes, and also maybe in this strike as well, the unions are basically just not giving everything that voice actors require when it comes to protection of the voices over AI, right? Or maybe not necessarily the unions themselves, but voice actors are seemingly wanting more from the unions or for them to do more, which I think is very fair. I had the question myself of, do you have any idea of what the process is like to basically set up your own union?
Just to be clear, the union is comprised of actors, right? So when we say that we want AI protections, we're not actually asking the union. The union is a collective bargaining organization that bargains on our behalf. Yes. So the union is actually asking the video game companies, hey, this is what we want. The union is supposed to represent the needs and wants of its constituency, just like any elected official, right? Like there's a board in place that's elected by the members of SAG-AFTRA, my union, and they are supposed to go to the negotiating table with our needs and wants and fight for them. I mean, like, yes, obviously there's always tension between a union and its members, like the way it's run, just like like an HOA or something like that. But it's not quite accurate to say that we want more from our union. It's the union is attempting to protect our right to publicity, essentially, the ownership of our own likeness, by putting it in contracts with video game companies. I see. And the problem is lying in the video game companies essentially saying no. There's a lot of nuance involved, but I wanted to kind of get that off the bat. How do you start your own union? I have no idea. Yeah. I have no clue how one starts a union.
Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely fair. That makes everything a lot more easily understood, I guess. I was under the impression that maybe in the previous strike, at the very least, the first time I ever heard about it wasn't during this SAG-AFTRA strike, it was the last one. But I think that was mainly, correct me if I'm wrong here, that was for actors in movies and things like that, right?
So that's an important point to consider. So SAG-AFTRA strikes by contract, which I explained in the video a little bit, right? Yes. So when you say the last strike, in my brain, I'm thinking the last video game strike, because we struck in 2016 over 4 very different issues. The strike for the film, now I'm not a film and TV actor, so I didn't really keep up too much with the strike. AI protections was a provision of that strike, and from what I understand, when the strike ended, it was still a pretty weak, we got some concessions, but they were pretty weak. We're kind of trying to use them, from what I understand, as a foundation from which to get more protection for us in this strike. But I had almost nothing to do. Most voice actors had almost nothing to do with the TV and film strike, unless they were, doing background voices work for television shows governed by that contract. We're not particularly happy with the film and TV contracts AI provisions, and are trying to use that as a foundation from which to continue negotiating.
Amazing.
Okay. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. When was the first time you actually heard about AI in the voice acting industry? And when you did first ever hear about it, what were your thoughts about it at the time?
Probably no more than a year and a half ago. 2 years ago at a maximum. And so I was actually contacted by a company who asked me if I wanted to make a model of me. People aren't saying that we don't want AI, right? Because it is a business tool.
Yep.
What we want is to be fairly compensated for it. People's issue with AI art is that it steals people's art, amalgamates it, and then produces its own thing and then makes money off of it, right? There's a great model in which, like, I don't work and I get paid. That's pretty cool.
It's
However,
amazing.
like, I have to be compensated fairly. Not only that, but I need to have license and agency over what happens with my voice. I don't want someone to just say, hey, I'm buying your voice for a video game, and then it's me spewing racial slurs. Right?
Of course, yeah.
So there's like a consent, compensation, all involved. When I first heard about this, you know, I've heard lots of different models, and some of them are good, but the time it takes an engineer, an AI engineer, to massage an AI performance to get what you want out of it is still long enough that you might as well just hire a damn actor. You know, I've been in thousands of sessions in my career. And so when you try to give direction to an AI, like, hey man, yeah, so we're really kind of framing the problem here in a way that's sensitive to these people's demographics. And we want to make sure that when we're talking to them, we're doing X, and you're like, tell that to an AI. We're not there yet, but I don't think it's doom and gloom at all. I compare it a lot to the music industry. The music industry back in like the 90s, I'm trying to use lingo that everybody understands. There's this like, basically like you can simulate a flute player, right? A flute player can record samples and then you put them in a sample library, and then you can then program the flute player without ever actually hiring that flute player. Ostensibly, you paid that flute player either a flat fee to be in that library or a licensing fee that every time someone buys that library from you as a library owner, you then pay that flute player. People are like, oh my God, that ended the music industry. It absolutely did not. The people that use sample libraries, on the whole, there's obviously a Venn diagram with some intersection here. The people that use those libraries were never going to hire musicians.
Yeah.
Right? The people that are using AI models for voice were never going to hire a voice actor. It's expanding the industry. And now, if it's done with consent and compensation, you have a subset of voice acting work that didn't exist to begin with, that now voice actors are getting paid for. And also, ostensibly, the product is getting better because it has a professional voice instead of Marge from accounting.
Yes.
You know what I mean? People are using the whole like, oh my God, you know, like it ended the music industry analogy in the wrong way. What we're talking about here is the idea that someone could bring a microphone to a concert, record your guitar playing, and then manipulate it and use it for another purpose. That's what we're talking about from a voice perspective. We're talking about someone scraping your voice from YouTube videos or scraping your voice from a 4-hour session you did and then using it forever and ever for whatever they want without ever paying you again. That's illegal. That's an existential threat. That is a lack of a right to publicity.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also think that's one thing a lot of people do misunderstand about this whole thing. It's not necessarily that VAs don't want AI in the industry in general.
Correct.
A lot of people, I don't think companies are misunderstanding that, by the way. I think companies are very well aware that voice actors just want compensating. Yeah. I think a lot of people from an outside perspective, and I've seen it with my own eyes while watching your other video, people in chat and everything. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that AI is not the problem, it's how it's being used and manipulated. That's the biggest issue here. And yeah, do you think it kind of does go on to the next question, but you kind of also answered it. The next question was any personal ideas or even solutions on how AI could help VAs rather than steal from them. You did already touch on the fact that being able to just record lines and get paid for not working again in the future would be a fantastic thing for a lot of people with consent and everything.
The thing is like anybody who runs AI understands that in order to have good AI, you need good models, right?
Yes.
You can't take a crappy actor and make them into a good actor using AI. You have to have the right nuanced performance in order to train the model. So trained, seasoned actors will always have a place, even in an AI environment, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What are your honest opinions on your voice used on AI for things like meme videos, meme covers, or fan skits? It's a very good question that I obviously want you to answer as honestly as you can, because I see this all the time, and I see a lot of different voice actors and voice actresses coming out and saying, please stop doing this. A lot of the people that are doing it don't seem to be doing it with malicious intent, but they're also just not thinking. a lot that they are doing exactly what you said and stealing someone's voice and posting it on the internet for thousands, millions of other people to see. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that one.
That is in some ways a lot stickier than the whole union thing. So obviously, like, you should never take anybody's stuff and use it for commercial purposes. Like, you shouldn't be making money off of my voice. When we look at like copyright law, does that idea fall under fair use, right? Like, is that a parody thing? Like, that's a legal rabbit hole that like I'm not qualified to go down.
Yeah.
What you're describing is what I call AI whack-a-mole. And there are a lot of actors that like I try to talk off the ledge and be like, listen, you are gonna burn yourself out finding every weeb on the internet that wants to make your voice tell them they're sexy, okay? Like, you are gonna, like, do not waste your time and energy. Like, you can't stop that.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair.
Like, you just can't. So why stress out about it? Now, you can certainly make it known, hey, I don't approve of this, but like going and hunting down YouTube channels is just not worth your time. Eventually, I hope that much like with copyright strikes when it comes to film, TV, music, and stuff like that, eventually the system algorithms will catch up. You're using somebody's voice without their permission. Nava has a really interesting effort going on right now called Lockbox, which is an idea of like almost like a digitally watermarking your voice. I don't quite understand the technology, but you know, giving somebody the mechanism by which to essentially copyright your voice, feed that to algorithms, so that when someone posts something of you that you don't approve of, either A, you're getting paid for it. If you try to monetize a YouTube video that's somebody else's content, it just merely diverts the monetization to them, or B, gives you a strike and you know, DCMAs you or whatever.
Yeah, okay.
So we're so in the Wild West right now that we don't know how that's going to shake out, but it's going to shake out somewhere. And it may happen when like we start doing this shit with politicians, where all of a sudden politicians are saying disgusting things and it becomes a controversy. And then they'll be like, maybe we should have a right of publicity. You know, like maybe we should make a law about this.
Too far now.
Yeah, no, it's too far. Someone bashed me on Twitter. So it'll catch up. And it's like about AI whack-a-mole. I try to like moderate my companion's panic. Right?
Yes.
It's like you got to let this process work out. Yes, advocate, stand up for yourself, stay informed, but like the hair on fire panic is just not serving anybody.
For sure. Next question kind of does tie into that as well. Have you ever heard your own voice being used in AI stuff? And if so, how did you feel about it? What were your emotions at the time?
So you're saying like without my consent?
Yes. More so without your consent.
Yeah, I've never heard it because I don't seek it out because it's not worth my time. I've said people, like, particularly with like the Genshin community has been saying like, oh yeah, people have made stuff from Risley's voice. No, I haven't heard it. I file it under rational ignorance. Like, what would finding out about it do for me? And the answer is probably nothing. I try very hard, particularly on social media. Like when I teach my students, like my #1 social media principle is to stay above the noise. There's so much noise, and the further you do get down into it, the louder it gets. Does that serve me? No. Emotionally, socially, financially, no, it doesn't. So I don't care.
When we raided into the stream the other day, you mentioned about the whole staying above the noise rule, and I found it very interesting. I
chant it a lot.
Yeah. It's good though. It's a good rule. Good. Next question. What can players of said video games or like video game enthusiasts do to help support the actions of the strike right now?
Amplifying voice actors' voices, you know, like helping us, you know, like your retweets, using the social capital that you have or that we have to spread the message. You guys are running a donation thing for Nava right now. That's fantastic. What I love about Nava is that they have like voice acting emergency funds. So like during a strike, it's possible like when someone's not working to be like, hey, I need some help with my electric bill, and Nava will help them out, which is great.
Damn, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's the really difficult part about striking in general is it's, you know, what's called in social psychology is a collective action problem. If everybody doesn't do it, it doesn't work.
Yes.
So if you have people that are like, oh shit, you know, like I can't blame an actor for being like either A, I starve, or B, I strike break. Right? You know, like I can't necessarily blame anybody for that. That's obviously an edge case. But,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that's a way they can do it. The way that they don't help is by dogpiling on Twitter. One of the most harmful things you can do as a user of social media is to engage in that kind of behavior particularly without the appropriate knowledge. You know, I've had my friends chased off social media platforms because they liked a tweet 10 years ago and somebody misinterpreted it, and suddenly like they were on like this hate stream and they were getting death threats. Like, don't do that. Like, don't engage in that, and don't like think before you retweet. Read more than the headline, for Christ's sake, right? Like, oh my God, stop retweeting headlines, retweet articles.
Yeah, it happens a lot, especially, I don't know, I've seen it a lot in the past probably 2-3 years. The constant dogpiling, the constant speaking without being informed, and like you say, everything else. It is a lot. I didn't realize it was that negatively affecting though, so that's good to know. Yeah,
it can be like totally miserable for some people in a lot of different cases. It gets bad. Yeah. And it gets like wildly out of control. You can't necessarily blame people for acting on the information that they have, but like most people don't go seek information. They're fed specific things by specific algorithms, and then they go, you know, then they go do the thing. I don't want to get too much of a tangent on how toxic social media can be, but
it's a cesspool, dude. But
it really is. It doesn't have to be, but it is.
Oh, if only everybody stayed above the noise, but yeah, sadly not. This one did also confuse me a little bit, because after watching your video, we also had a look at Sayu's too, because obviously Sayu streams Genshin and a few other games that he voices in too. And Sayu mentioned that during the strikes and such, he wouldn't be able to play games that he voices in, basically, or stream games that he voices in, sorry. So somebody asked, is the fact that Genshin seems to be under a different branch of Formosa that's not directly being struck against, does that mean that the branch that Genshin is under gives AI protection?
So here's the sticky part about all of this stuff, right? If the game isn't under a union contract, it's not governed by the union or its regulations. The safest way to protect yourself against AI as an actor is to only work contracts that have AI protections and are union. Now, that's not plausible. There are other things that you can do in a non-union environment, such as the rider that Nava wrote, right? Nava produced a contract rider, like something you can attach to a contract that says, yes, I will do your work, also sign this that says you're never gonna use my voice to train a model.
Of course.
That's great. Do I have the solvency financially to enforce that contract if it was broken? No, I do not. You have to operate on goodwill in that aspect. A union contract, we got several $1 million of lawyers that are going to rain hell on somebody if they break that contract. That's why we're encouraging people to either sign that interim agreement, which doesn't force a project to join the union, by the way. It can be anybody, right? Anybody can sign that agreement.
Okay.
Or reformat this contract and do it that way. So I think the question was like, does Genshin being not a union game, which it is not governed by a union contract, make it different? Yes, and it makes it difficult for actors to navigate it. Again, we're back into the collective action problem.
For sure. So basically, it's every single contract is dependent at that point on what is in the contract?
In a way, yeah. But I will say that the vast majority of actors right now are not working on those projects, even though they technically can without getting wrist slapped by the union. Many actors are choosing this time to solve the collective action problem and say, okay, we're done with this. If you don't sign this interim agreement, we're not coming back into the booth. It's common sense.
Yeah.
Including myself. So like, I'm not working on a whole handful of projects that I should, like, technically I can work on until they sign the interim agreement.
I mean, good for you. That's just standing up for yourself and your rights, right?
It is. I'm in a good position where my career has been very, very healthy for 10 years. I'm extremely diverse. I'm a good businessman. I have several lines of business. So like, me losing some video game jobs is not going to hurt the food I put on the table.
Yeah.
Other actors are not in that position, and it becomes difficult. Again, that collective action problem.
And I guess, like you say, that's where companies like Nava do come into
yes,
to help at certain points. Yeah, that's great. There's a lot about Nava that I had no idea about until I researched it after watching your video, and they do some amazing stuff.
They really do. Tim Friedlander and I have been friends for a long time, and we just had a conversation a couple weeks ago where I'm like, look, man, I love Nava. I love what you do. Can I please do something to amplify you guys? Because what you're lacking is what SAG-AFTRA has, right? Like that whole like branding out there kind of thing.
100%.
I'm pretty good at it. So like, can I help you out with that? So I'm going to become a lot more involved with Nava in the next year or two.
Can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, it'll be cool.
Somebody did say, how does all of this meaning that AI and strikes affect voice directors and similar parties that are not directly under the threat of AI? Did they
that's a problem that people talk about all the time. It's like one of the things that we as actors are trying to do is like, hey, casting directors, you're out of a job if we're out of a job. If you don't have the thing to go cast a game, you're done. Directors, you're done too. Everybody is done if we don't solve this at the lower level. So let's band together and do this.
Yeah.
And everybody's on board, right? And it's not even just them. It's like people that create all kinds of content. If we don't solve this at this level, the dominoes will fall, and all of a sudden, like, who will you direct? Who will you cast? That's your job. You're done. You don't have a career anymore.
So I assume they're pretty in support of the strikes and
absolutely.
Yeah, okay. That's good to know. I'd be concerned if they weren't. Digital art was another industry that's been greatly affected by the growth of AI. However, we're slowly noticing a decline in hype for it among the general populace. Do you think in a few years this might also translate to AI voices, perhaps even on a corporate level?
It could. I see lots of posts now, like when I audition for stuff, even on like open casting sites, they're like, don't give me your robot crap. There are some clients that will refuse to work with you if you have an AI model of your voice out in the wild because they work on government and security contracts, and that there's like a culpability issue there. It's a liability issue for that company. I don't know too much about digital art, but one of the reasons I think it is falling out of hype is it's just not cool anymore. Like, wow, great, you typed something in and there's this piece of art. I know immediately that it's AI, right? Like there's telltale signs where I look at this and I go, well, that's AI.
I feel like that's one thing a lot of people have started to pick up on too.
Yeah, with like AI generated book reports for school or novels. Like people are figuring it out. And they walk away. It's tasteless. It's colorless. There's nothing there. So do I think that there's a potential it will die down? Yes. I don't think we're done with the ramp up yet, but will it eventually die down? I think so.
Yeah, I think that's pretty true. I can see that happening too. From an outside perspective, obviously, I have no insight on the inside perspective whatsoever, other than from yourself and other voice actors. What is the union's stance on non-union VAs working on non-union games during the strike?
The union cannot govern anybody who's not a member of the union.
For sure.
The union also cannot govern any game that's not a union signatory.
Okay.
That's where we get into this whole collection action problem. And we, as the industry expands, there's a lot to talk about here. But like the union's stance is basically what I said previously. The best and safest way to protect yourself against AI is to work on a union contract that signed the interim agreement, which has AI protections involved, right? That's the stance. That is the truth. Working on non-union games during the strike, there's two ways to look at that. One, are you working on games that should be union, right? Because that company is a signatory. That's scabbing. That's strike breaking. That's hurting the collective bargaining agreement, and you're hurting the entire industry. The other is whatever, right? Like the other is like, we really prefer you to be in the union, but we can't yell at you. But we want to let you know that the best and safest contract for video game work is available here.
Yes.
There's tremendously larger conversations to be had about how does the union find and retain talent? What are the barriers to entry for the union that make it untenable for a non-union actor to join? And what sort of business environment are they providing to the video game clients that have not yet signed a union contract? Are they easy to work with? Are they responsive? Is it expensive? How does the union incentivize a non-union entity, whether that be a game, a company, or an actor? How does the union incentivize that entity to become union? That's a completely different discussion.
Yeah, that's very fair. I think that also kind of leads on the next question, which is how easy is it for companies to qualify or use the interim agreement?
It's instantaneous.
Yeah? Just sign up and done?
Yeah. Now, what makes it unique is the interim agreement is already written. There's already a procedure in place. It can be done what's called an OPO, which means that you can sign on to the interim agreement for a project without becoming a union signatory, which is nice because it's not like you're hooked in forever and you have to do union stuff for the rest of your career, right? Which is nice. So the way they set this up for the interim agreement is really smart because it makes it easy, right? You have to remove friction. The union has to remove friction in order to increase its support base. It has had significant problems doing that in the past, where, like the customer service wasn't awesome. And everybody has that story, but it's a big bureaucratic organization. So one step at a time, we're improving that. And the interim agreement is a great way to show we can streamline this shit. You can pencil whip this form. You're in, you're safe. Here's your union actors. Everybody go have fun. It's so easy. It's so easy.
Okay, that's great. I feel like something like that should be easy, so it's great that it actually is from like first-hand experience.
Actually, several of my non-union clients that I never thought in a million years would be on board with union bureaucracy immediately signed the interim agreement. Immediately. Like no hiccup in sessions at all.
Someone said, didn't catch if you talked about it. How long would you expect the strikes to go on for? I would assume until something happens.
Yeah, I mean, like I lost my crystal ball in 2002, but like the previous strike was not necessarily cut and dry. And I think it lasted for over a year. It was one of the longest strikes SAG-AFTRA has ever done. And when I say the previous, I want to be clear, the video game strike, but also the film and TV strike, that lasted 6 months or so. But the previous video game strike lasted much longer.
And that was 2016?
2016.
Okay.
And it's because the issues at play were very negotiable. It was about different compensation structures for actors based on the performance of a game. It was session length and safety. It was, God, it's been so long. There were 4 issues and I can't remember what they were, but all of them could be argued. This is like so cut and dry. Don't steal our talent. So I don't expect it to last nearly as long as the previous strike. It blows my mind. I think I said this in the video, like, it blows my mind that we're even here. I'm very good at playing devil's advocate. I'm very good at seeing both sides of an argument. I cannot see the production company's side of the argument. The ethical and moral high ground is so clearly held by the artists. I can't even believe we're on strike. I can't imagine it lasting that long. We've already made some headway in negotiations from what I understand about some of the other like tertiary objectives of the negotiations, such as, and I could be wrong on this, so, you know, don't quote me.
For sure.
Things like safety provisions for mocap workers, like having someone EMT level or above on set when you're doing stunts and stuff like that, which wasn't a thing prior. And really, like if you listen to Zeke Alton, who's part of Nava and a great, he used to be, I think he used to be a contract guy for the Navy. He talks about, you know, what we're really dealing with here isn't like the whole video game production landscape. We're dealing with a couple of bad actors within that struck group of companies. Other companies have all said like, yeah, we're ready to go. And I don't know that any of them have signed the interim yet, but like all of them are, much like the union has everybody's collective bargaining, those video games all have one lawyer. His name is Bill, right? Like he is there representing the interests of the video game companies. And so like, it has to be unanimous on their side. I think that's the sticking point, but I can't be sure. I'm not in the room.
But that was very informative. I think a lot of people in chat I was reading along at the time, and a lot of people were noting stuff down and asking some other questions and stuff as well. People like, you'd think it's common sense, but there's a lot of greed involved and things like that, which is very true. I don't know if there's a copy of the contract for everyone to see, but I don't think everyone even needs to see.
There's the SAG-AFTRA website. I think I link it in my video. What is it? There's like legitimately one of the good things about the way that SAG-AFTRA did this. So like that is a interim agreement page that you can actually look at it. And then if you also go back, if you go video game strike page on the bottom of that link, there's tons of frequently asked questions. Like everything you could want to know is there, which is very cool. I really appreciate the union doing that, because one of the biggest issues with the previous strike is there was no information out there. Like people couldn't even, like people were arguing with each other about like why we were striking. This is so much more cut and dry and so much better organized.
That's what I mean. I do agree with that. I think it's very, very cut and dry. It's very obvious what the problem is and what the fix would be, even to someone who hasn't really been involved with it. Like I say, I watched your video. I kind of understood from that point that what you wanted was autonomy and fair compensation, or just don't use your voice for AI. It's very, very obvious. Hopefully, I really hope something does happen pretty soon. Not for me or any other consumers. Well, the consumers too. Of the voices, because like you said yourself on stream the other day, it's like there's like a catalytic reaction when it comes to these video game characters and things where you voice them and give them that personality, but if they have nothing to resonate with, then where does it go? Which was beautifully put. I think that was great. I sat there for a second and I was like, damn. He got cool words.
I've spent my life surrounded by stories in one way or another, man, so it's like it's the key. Like this is the core. It really is existential in a lot more ways than people realize, this whole argument.
Yeah.
What happens if they want to recast the voice actors? The actors that take that job get ostracized and will never be welcome in social circles again. That's what happens when you break it. When you break a strike, right? Like if you're a scab, there's a difference between being a scab and working on projects that you're allowed to work on. If if you, Bran, if you get an audition from Formosa for a union game that should have been union to replace a union actor who didn't sign the contract, you will never be welcome in any conversation ever again.
Understandable.
Yeah, there's an incredible social price to pay for strike breaking.
Yeah, which I think makes a lot of sense. Is that only if they're part of the union as well, though? Or
no,
even if they're not part of the union?
Yeah, if I ever caught somebody, replacing me in a union game who was a non-union actor, they would never be welcome at any party I threw.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
I mean, of course, it makes sense.
Yeah, and then like word would get out, you know, like because I'd probably smear them, right? Like, I mean, like I would use my social capital to be like, this dude broke the strike. Are you kidding me? You know, like, yeah, like you're that's an incredibly morally transverse thing to do, and you definitely pay for it in tremendous amounts of social capital.
Interesting. Do you think there's any world in which the new if there was a voice actor that took over somebody else that was part of the union, do you think there's any world in which they wouldn't be aware that there was a union voice actor voice of the character?
Yes, and so that's the danger, right?
Yeah.
That's the danger, and why I tell people to not dogpile, because you don't know. Sometimes we saw during the previous video game strike, we saw this stuff like pop up on like Twitter and like voices.com, and like it was totally obfuscated. Now, like eventually you're going to get to the point, I think, during that you're going to like sign an NDA or sign a contract, right? And then you go, wait a minute. But if you're like, you know, Bob voice actor from Illinois, and you've never done this before or whatever, you might not know what that is. So there's conscious strike breaking, which is, you know, you're going to get crucified. And then there's unconscious strike breaking, which you'll probably get crucified, but it won't really be your fault. That's so like, yeah.
Which might even be worse, because then you sat there like, why? In some ways it is,
you know?
Interesting. Yeah, that is a very interesting point. God, yeah, that'd suck for whoever was taking over if they weren't aware of it. If they were, then I think that's scummy, but damn.
Yeah.
There was one more that I thought was quite interesting. It was due to the strike happening, is it right for the people who, and I think this will be a very obvious answer, but just so people know, because a lot of people were worried about this. Is it right for the people who follow this strike, as in us, the consumers, to play the games that we like? Or do we not do that? Because the person that was asking was not sure if they should play games like Genshin because of the strike.
That's a gray area that, like, if you look at SAG-AFTRA's website and the frequently asked questions, their position is, are creators and streamers being asked to stop playing certain video games? The only situation, this is very legal speak, the only situation in which streaming a struck video game would be in violation of our strike order is if you had rendered services as a performer in that struck game.
So that was like Zieja was saying, right? If he voices in something like Genshin Impact and Genshin Impact were under the thing, then wouldn't be allowed to play it.
Correct. The Genshin isn't a good example because it's not under the contract, but Marvel Rivals, right? Marvel Rivals just got announced. I'm Bruce Banner in that.
Oh, really?
Me streaming,
That's awesome.
Me streaming Marvel Rivals is breaking the strike, right? I'm promoting that game.
Okay.
Me streaming Genshin, technically not, since that game is not struck.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great to talk, and I'm always happy to educate people. It's like what I do is my side gig is I teach voice actors. So like it's always, you know, I'm always out there trying to educate people on what is often a mercurial industry.
Yes.
So anytime I can simplify, it's good.
Yeah, like you say, there's a lot of nuance to it, and a lot of there's also just a lot of terminology that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to this kind of stuff. So thank you for simplifying it, making it a lot easier to digest for me and for everyone else as well. Chat is thanking you a lot.
Oh, thank you guys.
Yeah, this likely, if it's okay with you as well, Joe, will go on the YouTube just to reach a wider audience. If that's okay.
No problem at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I teach a lot of different voice acting stuff at learnvoiceacting.com. That's like the easiest place that I go to, but I do a lot of free value content on my YouTube and stuff like that, but all that, like the center hub is learnvoiceacting.com. It's hard to forget, learnvoiceacting.com.
Yeah. I'll leave all the links and stuff as well on the YouTube video, at least on the screen and down in the description. Anywhere where people can find you for maybe less educational purposes and just fun. Or...
there's only one Joe Zieja around, so you type it into Google, I'm going to come up on every social media website. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate it. Thank you for agreeing to come on. Thank you for being so
guys.
kind,
It's been
so
a pleasure.
Nice. I appreciate it a lot.
Be good.
You have a nice rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you. What a nice guy, dude. What a nice fucking guy. That was Very, very educational. You learn more than you thought. Good. That's kind of what that whole thing was for. There was a lot of people back when we watched Joe's video very confused by, not by what Joe was saying, because Joe was articulating it very, very well. But there was a lot of people that were just confused by the whole situation. And like what they can do to help and what they shouldn't do and things like that. So I'm glad a lot of those questions were about that. The whole stream will stay on Twitch. Yeah, it'll also be uploaded to YouTube within the next couple of days. There will also be the fundraiser on YouTube on this video to get more money for Nava. Nava are doing some fucking amazing things, dude. Sorry for cursing so much, but yeah, dude, Nava are doing some absolutely incredible things. National Association of Voice Actors Foundation. So I'm glad we can support them with a fundraiser as well.